So, yeah, tonight's talk, we titled, or I titled actually, A Personal Invitation. And this is referring to something that the Buddha said about his own teaching. So there's a word which we don't actually use very much, so don't worry about trying to remember it. You may not hear it again for a while, depending on quite what you're doing at a spiritual level. And the word is ahipasiko. I'll spell it for those who like that. So it's EHIPASSIKO when you turn it into Roman letters. Ahipasiko, Pali word. It's most commonly found in the context of a chant that we do, which is a sort of what's called salutation to the three jewels, not just saluting the shrine, which we do every night, but something which is much longer. And part of that is celebrating the qualities of the Dharma. And one of those qualities is ahipasiko. And we often translate that as of a nature of a personal invitation. So the Dharma, in some sense, has the nature of a personal invitation. And that's what I'm exploring tonight. A here just means something like come. I can't actually remember what pasiko comes, but the basic nature of that quality, that word, is it's saying, come and try this. So that's where I want to start off with sort of, come and try this. So the Dharma is not something one can really sort of get just by sort of reading about it. So, some people really can get a taste for something reading about it, but sooner or later that isn't going to be enough. And often it doesn't take you very far at all. Or to be more accurate, if we're only engaging from up here, from the intellect, it doesn't get us very far at all. Of course, the intellect needs to be engaged. That's valuable. That's important. But if that's all that's going on, well, that's not really trying it out, is it? That's not really putting it into practice, trying it out. I mean, very famously, the Buddha said, test my teaching as a goldsmith tests gold, in the fire of your experience. So come and try it. See what happens when you meditate, when you practice Buddhist ritual, when you discuss the Dharma with other people, when you practice ethics, etc., etc. Yeah, it's not just reading. I don't know how many of you have had the experience of going to like an exhibition to do with Buddhism, some exhibition of Buddhist art or something like that. And you get these sort of little sort of captions, your description and explanation of an object or whatever it is, a statue. And generally speaking, in those cases, I find they don't really get it, as it were. And of course they don't. Yeah, in some ways, they understand more than I do. They understand a lot more probably about the history and some of the sort of the details of how this statue, whatever it is, came into being. But the spirit of it is generally not there, or maybe just a hint of it, but not really. So we need to actually come and try it to get a feel for what the Dharma life is offering us. And it is the Dharma life. So that's the other thing. It's not what the Buddha is inviting us into is a life, not just something you do on Tuesday evening, the rest of the week, you forget about it, as it were. I mean, of course, you may start that way, and that's fine. You're trying it out in a just toe in the water, as it were, of course. But once you start to think, oh gosh, yeah, I think there's something in this. There's something sort of calling to me. I'll use that metaphor quite a bit tonight. Once you feel that, well, then you need to gradually extend a couple of toes, a foot, as it were. And what happens if I try this out? What happens if I go on retreat? What happens if I start really getting to know one or two people a bit more? Ritual, no. So to really take up the Buddha's invitation, the personal invitation, you need to be sort of moving towards letting the Dharma into your life more and more gradually. At the same time, it's your choice. And you're welcome to come to this class, whether it's just a single toe or more of a foot or whatever. It's your choice. So it's not sort of compartmentalizing a Dharma life. That's a limited tryout, and it would have limited fruit. But sort of like opening up that compartment gradually, or maybe less gradually, and letting what's the Dharma is offering us, letting that sort of seep through, permeate our lives increasingly. That's the invitation that's being offered. The word which we translate as or render as order member is dharmachari for a man, dharmacharini for a woman, and it means dharma farer. That's how we typically translate it. Someone who's faring in the Dharma, which implies something, I think, a bit broader than particular practices. And that's the thing I wanted to come on to now. So again, this is the personal invitation. So if you receive a personal invitation to dinner, say, or come and visit a friend's house, well, when you turn up, you expect to be sort of greeted, welcomed in as yourself, as it were, not as a sort of an anonymous member of a crowd. So that's an important part of what this personal invitation is. It's hopefully speaking to us personally, and the Buddha's sort of meeting us in some perhaps quite mysterious way at a personal level. And some people experience this very strongly. You can go to a Dharma talk or go on a retreat or whatever, do a course. It can be like it's speaking to you personally. It's something that is really getting something that's important to you in a way which, if you talk to the next person in the room, it'd be speaking to them personally, but in a way which is a bit different, or even very different, but still both very real and very meaningful. So yeah, personal quality to this this invitation. Yeah. So what you're being invited to do in with the Dharma life is sort of find, be careful how I put this, in the course of time, let it flower in the natural way for you. So it's not like doing a prescribed set of things. Yes, of course, when you turn up to our center, we teach the mindfulness of breathing, we teach the metta bhavana. There are certain things that we do because we know that it's helpful to have a bit of structure and to have certain specific things to be sort of learning, and that those work for most people. So it's not like we don't give you carte blanche, as it were, do whatever you feel like. That doesn't work very well either when you're starting out, and perhaps not for quite a while. So we do recommend certain practices, but at the same time, there's another element to this whole process of exploring the Dharma, which is more sort of feeling your own way into it. So just give a couple of examples. So I was speaking the other day to a friend of mine who is extremely ill, and I mean extremely, and that's long term. And doing like a 20-minute, or we probably did half an hour, didn't we, meditation earlier, might have been a bit longer than that. That would just not be possible for her. She just is not physically capable of that. But nevertheless, she does very short meditations, but sufficiently experienced, just a very short meditation can really connect her with the spirit of the mindfulness of breathing, and then the spirit of the metta bhavana. So she's finding what, as it were, works for her. Now, of course, if you're able to meditate for longer, great, and we need to sort of grow our meditation muscles, as it were. Same time, we need to take ourselves into account. I'm thinking of an order member actually who very, very experienced, many of you will know, who said for many years he couldn't really meditate. He couldn't meditate for toffee, was the expression he used. I mean, I may as well say this is Ratnagosha, it's not a secret. Couldn't meditate for toffee. I don't remember exactly what that experience was, but he led a Dharma life. He reflected on the Dharma. He cultivated some very meaningful and deep friendships with people. He gave a huge amount of time and energy, and still does. He does now meditate. In fact, his whole meditation life has really come alive, but there was a period where he didn't. So it's not like that. It's not. The point I'm getting at is that the Dharma life isn't a lot of tick boxes. Oh yes, I'm doing that, I'm doing that, I'm doing that. Though again, of course, we encourage meditation, absolutely. It's really, really valuable and essential for most people, but it's not a tick box. Yeah, so we need to kind of get a feel for what the Dharma life is. I think that's a very important part of this. And the more fully we feel it, the more we can sort of, how to put it, I was going to say guide ourselves, but I'm very cautious. That will do for now. We can sort of guide ourselves. We can learn what set of practices and what ways of doing those practices. I'm not talking meditation, I'm talking much more broadly. What works for us, what brings the Dharma to life in our lives. So yeah, you'll keep hearing this note of caution here in what I'm saying. I need to counterbalance what I'm saying, because I'm aware that in our culture these days, we have what you could call the cult of the individual. It's like our modern society has adapted to emphasize more and more the individual choice. Being our own person. Yeah, individual choice, having what we want, being able to get what we want. Well, with the internet, like that. And that's dangerous for the Dharma life. So yeah, I'm talking about individual choice, I'm talking about personal choice, but at the same time, what that's about is not just following our whims, as it were. It's not just doing what we feel like. It's about learning where, well, I'll come back to what I said earlier, where the Dharma comes alive for us, what way the Dharma is inviting us to grow. That will perhaps come clear as I carry on. But in the meantime, as we're learning that, what we really need is other people. We need to get to know other people who are really practicing the Dharma, and people who are on a similar level to us, people who are more experienced than us. And particularly with people who are more experienced than us, we get more of a feel for the Dharma life through getting to know them, talking to them, even perhaps listening to them give talks. So other people are really important here. Communication is really important. As we have that dialogue between ourselves as an individual, at least in the statistical sense, and what the tradition and those wiser than us say might be helpful. Okay. I want to introduce at this point a metaphor which brings this personal invitation thing perhaps a bit but clearer can be very valuable. You may have heard this before. So it's a metaphor from the sort of somewhat later than the Buddha, though some of the Buddha's own teaching is of a similar sort of resonance. And the metaphor is well, the context really is India. Very hot country. Yeah, can be very, very dry and hot for a long, long time. And then it rains. I've not actually experienced that sort of like rain in India, but it rains. And suddenly everything starts growing. And yeah, there's life. So the Buddha's teaching is compared to a rain cloud, or to the rain coming from a rain cloud. And it falls on all the plants. Each plant receives the moisture of this rain, from this rain cloud. But each plant grows in accordance with its own nature. Yeah. An acorn isn't going to become an apple tree. An apple seed isn't going to become an oak tree. Each plant grows in accordance with its own nature. But at the same time, each one is drawn in broadly the same direction, up towards the light, up towards the source of the rain, actually. It receives rain and light, water and light, and so it lives and it grows upwards towards the source of the rain, the source of the light. Yeah. So we are like that. We are like a plant that's being drawn upwards. Gulapriya said that last week, didn't he? That was something you see this higher evolution is something that's being drawn upwards. And at the same time, we're being drawn, so all being drawn in sort of the same direction, but in a way that's unique to each of us. So that's something I'd like to explore a little bit further, is kind of what shape are we? I just want to ask, Neil, would you mind getting me a glass of cold water, please, or a cup of cold water? Thank you. Yeah, so if we're growing upwards in our own shape, as it were, well, what shape is that? What shape are we? So I want to set this in the context of something else from last week. So Gulapriya was talking about the niyamas, these sort of different orders, we often say, of conditionality, different ways in which conditions give rise to further conditions, including things like physical, Utu niyama, the law of gravity, and thermodynamics, and so on. There are these different orders of conditionality. And so, yeah, we have the three, what we sometimes call the lower niyamas. I won't go through them all. Well, physics, biology, and animal instinctive mental activity. You could loosely speaking say that. And then there's the fourth one. So the fourth niyama is karma niyama, the law of karma. So yeah, that's the fourth one. Thank you very much, Neil. That's great. So a lot of our growth is in accordance with the karma niyama. We're learning to act more skillfully. We're learning, to act more ethically, to develop more positive states of mind and express positive states of mind. Big topic. So obviously there's, in a sense, there's personal choice with that. We can choose in any given moment whether to act skillfully or not. And in fact, we do choose. Often that choice is not very conscious. But we can learn to take responsibility for that conscious choice. That's a very important part of this path of growth. And that's very much about personal choice. If we have awareness, we can choose to act in a positive way in any moment. But then there's the more mysterious thing. So through our own conditions, the conditions of our life, our conditioning, our particular shape of our lives on a sort of everyday sense, and because of our temperament and so on, we have all that as kind of the conditions in which we are planted, if you like, to come back to that metaphor. We've got the particular conditions in which we're planted, and those have effect, and we can't sort of grow in a way which is sort of a very different to what those conditions will allow. So yeah, I mentioned temperament. So a classic example of this is, well, we'll tend towards being quite introverted or quite extroverted, maybe very introverted or very extroverted. And probably that will remain the case. We can grow spiritually, and it's not like if we're introverted, we have to become an extrovert, because we've got to interact with people in a very sort of lively way. And it's not that if we're an extrovert, we've got to become introverted because we've got to go deep within ourselves. Yes, we have to engage with people. Yes, we have to go deep with ourselves. But that sort of temperamental bias is likely to remain the case. And that's okay. We can be skillful either way. Just keeping an eye on the time here, and I've got to move on. Yep, so it's not like we've got to change our temperament. We develop in skillfulness. All right, so yeah, we work with the karma niyama, but then there's the fifth niyama. Did you mention that last week, Gabriel? I've forgotten. Okay.
No, I didn't.
So the fifth order of conditionality is what's called Dharma niyama. We often speak of this as the type of conditionality that governs the arising of a Buddha. Someone who's self-aware, in the way that we all are, is capable of becoming a Buddha. And yes, that involves the karma niyama, but it doesn't just involve the karma niyama, it also involves something else. And hopefully what I'm saying tonight will give you some indication of what on earth that's about. So it's like the Dharma is calling to us in accord with our shape and in accord with the shape that we've grown through cultivating positive karma. So we act through conscious choice in the karma niyama, and through that we become a particular shape, and then the Dharma speaks to us through that shape. And that's how the Dharma niyama seems to operate. So I want to explore this a bit, and this is going to be a bit mysterious, but hopefully you'll get some idea what I'm talking about. So we're feeling, as it were, the shape of our spiritual potential. Who are we capable of becoming spiritually? And that can be something quite mysterious and hard to fathom, but as we practice, more and more the Dharma speaks to us in particular sorts of ways. And I want to look at various different ways in which we can connect with that. So one thing is we can look at what really inspires and moves us. And not just talking about the Dharma here, though obviously particular teachings really speak to us, while that gives us an indication of how we really want to grow. But it can be things that are not explicitly to do with the Dharma at all. So we can be very moved by stories. A particular book or movie might really speak to us, or something in it might be sort of... So a classic one for some people with this is, in one way or another, the old Lord of the Rings, very mythical story. There's a lot in that can sort of, oh gosh, something that really sort of attracts or interests me. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that or with the film versions, but at the end of the Fellowship of the Ring, two of the hobbits are going off to this dark land, as it were, where the evil Lord Sauron has control, and they've got to go there for their quest. And it's a very, very dangerous thing to do, but they're going together. And that's something that really speaks to me, particularly the way that it's done in the film. Sort of, they're both taking a risk to accompany each other into this very dangerous place. So there's something about friendship there, not going it alone. But there's also the quest. There's something very heroic, and that speaks to me. I think the Dharma life is heroic. And it is a kind of a quest, or that's one way of looking at it. Moving to be like the Buddha, becoming the Buddha, is certainly, you could say it as like a quest, a mythic journey, and a dangerous one in a sense. In fact, as far as our ego sense is concerned, it's about as dangerous as anything can get. Yeah, so it can be things that inspire or move us. It can also be activities that we're drawn to engage in, or even the type of occupation we have. It can be something beyond the actual occupation. So an example of this. So I was reading a booklet by Subhuti, who's one of our most senior order members, who I'll quote again later, and he was talking about another order member who many years ago wanted to join the British Royal Air Force, the RAF. And fortunately, this other person was exploring, as I was talking about earlier, exploring why they wanted to do this, because it's not the ideal thing for a Buddhist to be flying a plane and sort of bombing or shooting. So this person who either was or later became an order member, I forget which, was exploring, well, what was this about? And I'm quoting Subhuti in referring to this other person. What he wanted was the experience of freedom and clarity and of perspective that you get from flying, from being above it all, being able to move in any direction, being in a medium which is completely open and clear. So that was interesting. So in this case, this person felt they wanted to join the Air Force, but actually what it was really about was something to do with what their consciousness wanted to experience. And that was something totally in accord with the Dharma. A freed up, clear consciousness, able to move in any direction. Perspective, all of that. So yeah, there's attraction to particular activity, but when he really looked into, felt into, I think probably more than thought about, felt into that, the more he realized, oh, it's about an inner experience that I'm wanting. I'm trying to experience through this activity, but actually, no, it's something of a different order. So with this kind of thing, there's a sort of a trap. We can be attracted to something, and there's a trap that we sort of can take it on its own level. Whereas actually what's really attracting us is something that's through, want to experience through the activity rather than the activity itself, but not necessarily. So a friend of mine is very attracted to the myth of the alchemist. That's another spiritual myth, sort of internal magic, as it were, transformation. He makes ceramics. And that making of ceramics is in a way of trying to live out. Maybe this is my inference rather than something he said, so don't quote me, but could be a way of trying to live out the myth of the alchemist, transforming clay into a beautiful vase or whatever. But of course, in this case, it's something that's very valuable in its own right. And actually doing that could lead him deeper into the myth, which he can then also live out on a spiritual level. Yeah, a very different type of example. And this is my own life. So we can have a sort of a question or a problem within ourselves that we feel drawn to resolve, or as we start to work on it, it starts to feel very significant. So for me, there's been a whole aspect of my spiritual journey has been about recognizing a certain kind of self-hatred, certain aspects of myself that go back to childhood that I really basically developed a hatred towards. That's a strong word, and I didn't initially think of it like that, but that's basically what it was. And then realizing, oh gosh, I don't have to do that. I can learn to be free of that, let it go, notice it, let it go, and bring in metta, kindness. That's kind of an alchemical thing, actually. I don't particularly connect with the alchemists. But that sort of, learning to be, to let go of this poisonous thing that's very painful, turn towards the pain with kindness and be free of it. That's something that speaks very strongly for me. Very strongly to me. That seems to be one way in which the Dharma wants to live through me, and then not just for myself, but if I can help in little ways other people to free themselves in a similar way, then that's wonderful. And maybe I should skip that, but I don't want to. I can even find that in music. If I look at you can ask me later what it is, but the piece of music that I find most beautiful is actually evoking that myth, if you like, for me, that myth of, I suppose it's kind of a healing process. You could say it's like being a healer in a particular kind of way. You want to give it mythic language, healing through kindness. Yeah, okay. So all of this is a process of, if you like, becoming more and more fully ourselves. I need to skip ahead or I'm going to run out of time. But so this is going to be unique to each one of us. Each one of us will be, the Dharma will be calling to us in different ways, and we can find that through how we respond to the Dharma, and we may be able to find it through exploring other things that attract us in our lives. We may be able to find other myths, to put it that way, that are spiritual myths that also call us. So we grow in a unique way, and what's calling to us is calling to all of us, and there's something universal about it. So the sunlight or the rain is the same for all plants, just that they grow in a different way, but they're all growing in the same direction. So we can make this whole exploration a bit it can be a bit of an ego thing in which we get obsessed with identifying what the myth is for us. And yeah, it can be a very helpful thing. But if we can make it too much about me and miss that actually the core of it is something which is beyond. So for me, if I look at that, as I've just spoken of, as like a healing myth, what speaks to me most strongly in that is wanting to bring something of that to other people, which means letting go of myself actually and responding to others. That seems to be at the core of it. That's what attracts me most beautifully, most strongly about that myth. Beauty. Yeah, okay. Beauty. So sometimes what's calling to us, in fact, quite often is calling to us through beauty. I've mentioned music. I've mentioned a scene in a film that I find very beautiful. About 6 odd weeks ago, I was in Barcelona. I was visiting some Sangha friends in Barcelona where they have a centre, where we have a centre. And I've been there a number of times, and every time I go to Barcelona, I have to go to the Sagrada Familia, the Basilica of Gaudi. I don't know how many of you have been to that. I'm not sure when it opened up the interior. It was probably about 18 odd years ago, something like that. I'm not that interested in the outside of the basilica, but I have to go in. If I go to Barcelona, I have to go into the Sagrada Familia, unless I'm just there overnight or something. And you get this amazingly vibrant stained glass. It's quite unlike anything I've seen, can remember seeing anywhere else. Incredibly bright colors, quite abstract shapes, really vivid colors. You get this tremendous sense of space and a huge amount of light coming in. I just find it really beautiful. I mean, it brought tears to my eyes several times on my last visit. Just almost quite overwhelmed by it. Now I could just say, "Oh, that's a really nice basilica. You know, really, really lovely stained glass, and yeah, really, really beautiful building. End of story." But actually, no, that's not the end of the story, because if I really look at what's speaking to me there, it's not about the external object. It's about something that's evoking in me. In a way, it's again a state of consciousness that I'm touching in on, that I'm not fully inhabiting, but I can feel the potential for fully inhabiting. And that's beautiful. In a way, what's really beautiful is not the stained glass or the light coming in. It's that something beyond, which I'm experiencing as a possibility for me. It's something that transcends me in the ordinary sense. Being in the basilica has given me a taste of it, and I have a sense of, the Dharma actually is calling me in this direction. And this is something that transcends who I am now, transcends me as an individual in the statistical sense. Yeah. So one little quote, even more mysterious, and I'll start to wrap up. I'm not going to try and explain this. This is Subhuti again. We exist as a kind of totality, as whole, outside space and time. And our lives, from one point of view, are an attempt to express that fully within time. Now, you may just think, what? But you may also find something quite tantalizing about that. I certainly do. Something in us, something of our nature beyond space and time speaking to us. Don't worry if that's just completely weird, but it may suggest something or entice you. Okay, there's more than I could say, but I'm going to have to wrap up, and so there's time for groups. A few things that we can actually do. For firstly, going back to what I was saying earlier, we can really let the Dharma into our lives, not seeing it as a compartment of our lives that we keep separate from everything else, but can we start to let it more into our lives? Can we explore more in dialogue what shape the Dharma life might take for us at the moment? And see if there are things that we're particularly attracted to in life, particularly if they sort of feel like they've got a bit of a mythic element, or if it's a sense of beauty about them. What is that about? It might be great on its own level. It might be a distraction. Either way, what is that? What is it that's really calling to us? What is it in the Dharma that's really calling to us? So I had better stop there, I think. Hopefully that's woven or evoked something, woven a tapestry or evoked, I don't know. Yeah, so that whole area of we grow uniquely. We're being invited to come and try out the teaching, really try it out, not just read about it. Letting the Dharma permeate our lives more, testing it out. And not a matter of ticking boxes, but getting a feel for the spiritual life. And then, there's that metaphor of the plants. What shape are we? Can we start to explore? Do we already have a sense of that? might we be taking growth a bit too literally and not seeing what's beyond the things that we're attracted to?